Welcome to this explainer where we're going to dive into a pretty cool shift in football coaching. The big idea? Preparing players for anything the game throws at them instead of just planning for a few specific situations.
So, let's kick things off with a really powerful quote from none other than Lionel Scaloni, Argentina's World Cup winning coach. You know, he's watching his own kids play over in Spain, and he's got this nagging feeling. He's worried they're being overcoached, that the real essence of football is getting lost. And look, this isn't just some off-the-cuff remark, right? This is a serious warning from one of the sharpest minds in the game today.
So, what is he even talking about, this lost essence? Well, it really gets to the heart of a huge conflict in how we teach the game. It's basically a clash between two totally different ways of knowing football. Okay, this is where it gets really interesting. Think of it like this. On one side, you have knowledge about the game. This is like reading the instruction manual, right? It's the coach yelling from the sidelines. It's those pre-planned drills you run over and over. But then on the other side, you have knowledge of the game. And this is the real deal. It's the hands-on, in-the-moment experience. It's the player actually seeing a tiny gap open up, feeling the defender breathing down their neck, and making a split-second decision. Scaloni's big fear? We're spending way too much time on the manual and not enough time letting players actually play. So let's dig into that a little deeper. How does the traditional coaching model, the one many of us grew up with, actually create this problem? How does it end up valuing following orders over genuine creativity? You know, this old school approach, it's built on a few key pillars. It's very coach-led, right? The coach demonstrates the perfect way to do something, and the players just replicate it. It's all based on these older theories that kind of treat players like little computers. You just input the data, the instructions, and the correct action is supposed to pop out. It sees thinking and doing as two totally separate things. First you perceive, then you act, like a machine. And that's where the real risk is. When you hammer players with these pre-planned patterns and nonstop instructions, you're not teaching them the game. You're teaching them a model of the game, a rigid, predictable version. So yeah, they get amazing at the drills in practice, but the second they're in a real match with all its chaos and unpredictability, the game doesn't follow the script, and they freeze. All right, so if that traditional way has some major flaws, what's the alternative? Well, this is where it gets super interesting. We're going to talk about an approach called Ecological Dynamics. This approach completely flips the old model on its head. It says learning isn't some neat, straight line. Nope, it's a messy, dynamic, constantly changing process. It starts from the idea that every single player is unique, every situation is different, and there isn't just one right way to solve a problem on the field. So skill isn't about perfectly copying a technique. It's all about being able to adapt on the fly. The core idea here is something called Newell's model of constraints, and it's actually pretty simple when you break it down. It says that learning emerges from the interaction of three big things. First, the individual. You know, a player's height, their speed, how they're feeling. Second, the task, the rules of the game, the size of the field. And third, the environment. Is the pitch bumpy? Is it raining? All three of these things are constantly interacting and shaping how a player acts in any given moment. And this brings us to a really cool concept called affordances. An affordance is basically an opportunity for action that the environment offers you. So imagine a small gap between two defenders. For a small, quick player, that gap affords dribbling. It's an invitation to run through. But for a taller player who sees the whole field, that same exact gap might afford a killer-through ball to a teammate. So skill isn't just about kicking a ball well, it's about getting better and better at spotting and using the affordances that are right for you. Okay, that's the theory, but how do you actually use this stuff on the training ground? How do you make it practical? Well, that's where the constraints-led approach, or CLA, comes into play. With CLA, your whole role as a coach shifts. You're no longer the drill sergeant, barking orders. You become an architect, a designer of learning environments. Your job isn't to give players the answers. It's to build a practice session where they're almost forced to discover the answers for themselves. And you do that by tweaking and playing with those constraints we just mentioned. And this whole thing is guided by a few really smart principles. First, your practice has to be representative. That just means it needs to look and feel like a real game. There have to be opponents, teammates, a goal to attack, a goal to defend. Then, you've got repetition without repetition. And this one is a game changer.
You're not having players repeat the same solution over and over again. No, you're having them repeat the same problem, which forces them to come up with lots of different solutions. And finally, you do this by manipulating constraints, making the field smaller, adding a two-touch rule, little tweaks that guide players toward an outcome without you ever having to say a word.
And here's a framework that makes it even easier to apply. You can think of it in 3 phases. First, you co-design the practice. You, the coach, set up these rich, information-filled environments based on what your players need. Then, phase 2, it's all about the player. They get to explore, experiment, and adapt inside the world you've built. And finally, phase 3 is about recognizing that this is a cycle. As your players get better, or taller, or faster, you have to adapt the environment right along with them. It's a living, breathing process.
So let's bring it all home. What does this actually mean for you, the coach, when you step out onto the pitch for practice this week? It means you can finally let go of chasing that mythical perfect technique. It doesn't exist. Instead, you get to embrace the beautiful, messy chaos of football. Your job becomes designing sessions that practically beg players to explore and solve problems. The goal completely shifts. You're no longer trying to create players who can follow a script. You're developing players who can improvise and thrive when the script gets torn to pieces. I love this quote because it just nails the whole idea. We're not trying to build compliant robots. We want to develop adaptive, creative problem solvers. We need them to get really, really good at the process of finding a solution so that no matter what the game throws at them, they're ready. So really, it all boils down to one simple but powerful question. The next time you walk off the training pitch, just ask yourself this. Did my players spend today learning my solutions to a problem, or did I create a space where they could discover their own? The answer tells you everything. It tells you if you're preparing them for a plan or preparing them for the actual beautiful game itself.